Today, my guest is Vinny Chopra. He's a returning guest. He's a successful multifamily syndicator. He's done over 20 successful syndications, and he's here for another dive into multifamily real estate investing. And today, our topic is the letter of intent and purchase and sale agreement. But first, a quick reminder, if you like the show, please let us know. You can do this. You can like, you can leave a comment, you can share the show, and you can subscribe. Also want to remind you that if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, you can check out our YouTube channel and go to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. All right. Now that we've established that, I'd like to welcome back my guest, Vinny Chopra. Vinny, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Darren. Thank you so much. It's early morning here. Well, about 9 o'clock or close to it. Had a great walk this morning and my miracle morning like I do, paying gratitude and listening to some good positive thoughts and some chanting and things like that to keep my mind and bodies alert.
No, that's great. I see on most mornings, I see a little video on Facebook from you where you're out passing the positive stuff there.
Thank you.
And what time do you start your morning?
Usually it's been around 5:30 now. I get up about 5:30. It's so
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous because when I was doing a W-2 job, I used to get up at 6:30 and 7:30, right? 7 o'clock maybe, not 7:30, 7 o'clock. But now having the freedom to not really, not to be anywhere that I don't want to be and not to be in a position where I have to get up that early, the mind says, get up early and get the day started. A couple of days this week, I got up at 4:30, by the way, and by 8:30, I had done 4 hours of really good writing and videotaping and things like that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love the early morning get started. Hey, before we get going here, if you could share with the listeners just to kind of reacquaint, I'm hoping by now that most of the listeners have heard at least one of the episodes we recorded previously in our kind of ongoing series about multifamily. But just for those that maybe haven't heard a little bit about your background, if you could share a little bit.
Oh, sure, Darren. I came from India about 40 years back. I'm a mechanical engineer from there with $7 in my pocket. And I sold Bible books and encyclopedias outside Atlanta for my tuition, earning tuition. Then I became a promotional consultant, we called it, as a fundraising consultant. And then I became a broker in 2004 in California. We live near San Francisco. And we kept on buying single family homes. But then we realized, the cash flows were not scalable. They were not that much that we thought we could early retire, things like that. So in about 10, 12 years back, I caught the bug of multifamily investing. And then I found out didn't have too much money. So that's when I got into syndication world, which has been a powerful lifestyle changer where you could use other people's money, OPM, and then scale it up. And we have been able to scale to the highest of 3,100 units. And now we have sold also quite a few, 26 syndications, and I'm in the midst of my 27th syndication right now.
Wow, that's impressive. So in 12 years, you've managed to do 27 syndications?
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
No, that's impressive.
Thank you.
And I'm really looking forward to our talk today. And I just want to remind the listeners, if they haven't heard the prior episodes that Vinny and I have recorded, we've covered a number of topics. And if you look in the show notes, I'll make sure to put the links in there. But the topics we've covered in the past include why multifamily, why syndication, building your syndication team, attracting and communicating with investors, and also underwriting the deal. And to add to that library of topics today, we are going to jump into letter of intent and also the purchase and sale agreement. And so this is a goal Vinny and I set out a few months back. We wanted to record a number of these so that there could be a kind of an A to Z for the listeners to acquaint and have a better understanding and and kind of look at and kind of what is it? How can they get involved in this? Is that a fair summary, Vinny? Do you think that?
Totally, totally, Darren. It's so timely also because as we find the right opportunity and we have done the great underwriting, comprehensive underwriting, we have looked at the emerging market, we have looked at this is the right property. Now, the next thing comes is the letter of intent, which letter of intent, just like the word says, it's our intention to purchase that property. We are approaching the seller now through the broker, of course, to write to them and say, these are the general terms we would like to purchase your property. We have looked through it, and then the broker has given us a tour, or we have done all the analysis and everything, and we have talked to our loan broker also. He's blessed some kind of loan to us, percentage wise interest rate. And if it's going to be a 20% down loan or 25% down loan or 30% down loan, the older the property, many times we have to put down about 30% down of the sales price or 25%. But Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans can be gotten up to 80% also, LTV, loan to value ratio. So letter of intent, and I would love to provide this for your audience if they would like to kind of follow through with that.
Yeah, if you would make that available, I'll prepare a link for the listeners if they want to download that. And I think you mentioned also you've got a cover letter that you
I do.
use as well.
Totally.
As far as a sample, I think that
It'll be my pleasure.
for anybody that's looking to get into this, these are some critical tools to better help you be successful. And I think that having an example is always a kind of a shortcut as opposed to winging it and hoping you do it right. Vinny, let me ask you, because you kind of described what a letter of intent is. But let me ask you, is it a common thing? Do you find that all brokers are willing to use a letter of intent?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, unless you are in the midst of, or you just hit the property, it was falling out of contract or something, or you're in the best and final phase, we call it sometime, Darren. So that way you may skip the letter of intent and then just give state sales contract also. I've done that, because what had happened was a couple of times where the broker had showed me that property before and we were looking into buying it. Then we didn't buy it for a month or two, but then it came back on the market. Then we just did the contract. So it's a good idea because letter of intent is not a firm contract at all. It's the intention to purchase it. That's one thing we need to understand. So if we are ready to get into the contract and we think that this is the right opportunity and the seller is not going to wait too long and they will get in contract with you, I would go ahead and send them a sales contract through the attorney. I don't like to do these legal sales contracts by myself, even though I've done so many of them. It's good to get a good real estate attorney. I would highly, highly recommend, because that has really helped my business grow to the position where we are doing such a large volume, over $200 million of our assets, So it's worth to pay that money.
Right. Let me ask you on the purchase sale agreement versus the letter of intent. Is there a standard letter of intent? Is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yes. Letter of intent can be taken from anyone, mine also, and just framed around it. That's no problem at all. I don't get my attorney involved anymore. Once we have gone through one letter of intent and got his blessings on it, now all we need to change in that is the terms of the purchase and and how much we're going to put down, how much earnest money we're going to give, things like that, right? So letter of intent is not that binding. That's the word I wanted to use.
Sure. Let me ask you. So you mentioned a couple of things. What all is included in a letter of intent? What are the key items?
Totally. In the letter of intent, like I'm just kind of reading it, and as your audience will also look at it, of course, it's got the date, very, very important on the top. Then letter of intent, name of the property, full address, how many units it is. Like this is Arbor Pines apartments, 140 units. And then I address it to the broker. You never address it to the seller, to the broker, based upon the information furnished by you and your company. So we are telling them, since they have given us the profit and loss statement and the rent roll and other information that we ask for, like capital expenditures report and a lot of other things based on the 140 operative units. So we want to make sure that all the units are operational, that there are no down units, and occupancy of 94%. So I like to also write it down because we don't want the seller to not have the occupancy, which we got it at the time of we are putting the letter of intent. It's going to be taking about, if it's accepted, another 7 days for the contract to happen, and then the due diligence phase and all that time. So we want to make sure that the occupancy doesn't go take a dip, big dip. So I like to put that in there. And then please find outline below the general terms and conditions under which the Monil Investment Group, which is my company, or assigns. It's very, very important that we put our company's name, then slash and or assigns is willing to purchase the above reference property, which we call it in parentheses property. This letter will serve as a letter of intent between the owner of record, the seller, and Monil Investment Group, which is my company LLC, or its assignees, the buyer. So that's just the first paragraph.
Gotcha.
So in a very simple 5 lines, we have explained lots of, nature of it, right?
Right.
And
in
then,
that,
please.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, then it says, let this letter serve as our expression of intent to purchase the above reference property under the following terms and conditions. So that's when we lay out all the terms.
Gotcha. Talking dollar amounts, etc.
Correct. Like the different bigger headings, if I may say, would be number 1, like purchase price. And it has got the total purchase price, then the first mortgage and the cash payment, the down payment, broken up into. Number 2 is inspection period. That's a very, very important part of the thing. Then the third is earnest money deposit. How much money we are depositing within 3 business days of the execution of the agreement, purchase agreement. Then we have the purchase agreement, and I will explain. That's number 4. Financing period, very, very important. If there is a contingency of the getting a loan, and we have to have all the, things gone through the broker and through the financial institution. So financing period. Then we have the brokerage fee. Many times it's always the seller pays the brokerage fee, but it's good to put that in there, that we are not paying any brokerage. Closing date, very, very important. What's our intent to close? How many days after the loan period is finished, the financing period or the due diligence period? And then the 8th one, readiness of property. Very, very important again, because seller acknowledges that the property has stabilized occupancy at the time of this letter and will operate the property diligently by making their best effort at maintaining a market occupancy rate at the closing. And I put percentage also, like I said, lender requires, 95% or better stabilized occupancy at closing. So it's good to drop those lines in there in our safeguarding ourselves,
Right. No, I like the way you walk through that there, kind of specifying the different things. And you mentioned timelines. What's a customary timeline that you work with if you've got if you're ready to move on a property based on what you see? Can you give some timelines on the
Sure.
inspection, financing, due diligence?
I would love to, love to. Darren, what we find is that if the property is a B class, it might take us less time to really do the due diligence. I have bought them even in 21 days. I say 21 days from the receipt of the inspection documents. That is a very big thing because a lot of times sellers, if they don't have all the documents we need for the due diligence, it delays the process. So I like to write buyers shall have 30 business days. If we put business days, a lot of savvy investors or buyers put the business days in there. That makes it almost 45 calendar days. But very shrewd sellers catch it also. And they say, oh no, it has to be 30 calendar days. So they don't want to give more than 30 days, calendar days, including the weekends also. So that's it, something semantics, we can take care of it. The other thing is the inspection documents. So that is a big thing because we do put the due diligence items in the purchase and sale contract so that the seller knows what we are looking for, which includes all the rent rolls for last year, the P&Ls, the contracts, service contracts. It includes if they have a survey, if they have phase one study, environmental study we call it. Of course, all these things are asked for, in the due diligence. And there's a big list of things, I just went over some major ones.
Right. But you spell all this out in your letter of intent as what would you expect them to provide?
Actually, not really. It
No?
just says in the letter of intent, inspection documents, we call
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But then in the purchase agreement, we spell them out. Yes.
Gotcha. So you don't want to scare them off in the letter of
No.
intent. You want to, make it sound like it's warm and cuddly. Okay. So you've got the letter of intent. You've spelled out kind of the framework for what you're looking to move forward with. You present this to the selling broker or the seller's broker. And you mentioned something about a cover letter.
Yes.
What do you tell us what's on that and how's that?
Totally. Now the cover letter, which again, I would love to provide that as a sample. Again, it's addressed to the brokers in my company. And then I have my logos, investment group, Monil investment group, Monil management group, both the places. It's good to put your company logo, make it professional and make it color. If you're, some of the things are color logo, looks nice. And then, again, it says like Dear Mark and Tom, they were two together brokers on the seller side. Attached is the submission of our offer package for Arbor Pine apartment. Then address is there. This package contains our letter of intent based on the actual financial numbers from the property operations. We are pleased to mention that Vinny has closed on 14 multifamily properties in Texas in the past 8 years, with most recently 7 closings to make it 21 total assets. So we try to tell them, give them some background if I'm a closer or not, if the buying party. Of course, it's kind of hard if somebody's just starting out, but it's good to put the experience in there in the cover letter so that the seller is looking at, should we, give the contract to the buyer or not? The number one thing they are looking for is, are they going to close or not? Or are they going to tie up this property for 3 months or 4 months, and then it's going to come back if the loan is not approved, or if the experience of the buyer is not sufficient for the lender, things like that. And then the recent acquisitions are Cambridge apartment in the same city, and I put the date, Albion apartment on this day, both in Angleton, acquired Sienna Villas, blah, 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 down the street, all those, and I put all the dates in there. Then Monil Investment Group is the right buyer for this property, and we have put together a comprehensive offer package to show the seller that we are in a position to close on this property with confidence and speed. So I like to use those words in my cover letter always, confidence and speed, because that's what the broker wants. That's what the seller wants, So that's important. Since
Right. No,
inception, we have
okay.
closed on 100% of the property. Sorry, we have put under contract, including in this package, are the following materials. Number one, letter of intent, lender term letter pending, which is coming from the broker, loan broker, company principal profile, my profile. We respectfully request that you provide this cover letter and the entire contents of this package to the seller. Please contact Vinny Chopra, blah, blah, if you to discuss the offer.
No, that's great. And I think the thing I just want to reiterate to everybody here that at this point we've essentially not spent any money, correct? I mean, there's
No.
there's no cost to do this. This is more of a you've done your analysis based on the information provided by the broker.
Yes.
It measures up to what you believe could be a good opportunity. You make your offer based on the numbers that have been presented and what you want to acquire the property at. And again, like you said in that letter, you're demonstrating that not only would you like to, but if you're going this far, the likelihood is you're going to close unless there's some glaring problem that the broker hasn't disclosed.
So true, so true. Also, I wanted to mention, I know a lot of people have different rule of thumb as to how much earnest money should we deposit. And I really have used the rule of thumb of 1% of the purchase price should be the earnest money. Of course, if it's in a very tough situation where a lot of bidding, like right now, a lot of tight market is there. A lot of sellers are not taking any contingencies of the loans, and also they are asking for hard money. Now, hard money is the non-refundable money, which the sellers are asking to just gauge your strength and how sincere you are that you're going to close on it. So many times, you have to say, okay, I'll pay 1% earnest money, but 25% of that will be going hard within 5 days or 7 days. And then after due diligence period, the whole earnest money goes hard or non-refundable. So what that tells the seller is that it is already crossed all the hurdles of the due diligence, and now we are getting into the financing phase of the property.
Got it. And those that's kind of more of a condition that you're seeing in the current marketplace, and that you're kind of what you're having to do to
Yes,
compete for some deals there.
totally, totally. Also, in the contract, even though in the letter of intent I don't write it, the extensions, but always, always, since my attorneys have recommended for me to put 2 extensions where I give $25,000 each to get a better extension if we need to. 2 weeks extension after the deadline that we have passed. It's like 30 days for inspection period, due diligence, and then 45 days after that to close. That's total of 75. But if the lender needs a little bit longer, then we are able to extend the contract rather than just close it. Then we have lost all that money. So it's good to have 2 extensions put in with some money in it, to give to the seller.
No, that makes great sense. And like I said, I mean, once you get that far down the road, if your intent is to close and there's some sort of a lender issue, or
Sure.
you never know with the capital markets, if there's something going on where there's more underwriting or challenges there that's out of your control. So
Totally, totally. I would love to. Maybe this is the right time, even though it's not with the letter of intent or purchase. I highly, highly recommend that as we get into the due diligence phase, which is right after we sign the execution date of the contract, we arrive at the property, we hire a team or we take our own team. We do 100% inspection of all the units, and we do all the physical inspection, the roof, the boilers, everything. It's good to, if you find some things that you did not account for in the deferred maintenance or the inside interiors of the units that we were not thinking about, or the appliances being bad, or AC units and things like, we should work on a repair letter. It's called repair letter pretty quickly, because we don't want to wait until the 27th day of the 30-day inspection to give that repair letter. then we only have 1 or 2 days to negotiate.
Right.
I like to give the repair letter within 10 days of the due diligence so that we could tell the seller, no, these are the pictures. And I keep on accumulating a lot of pictures in my Dropbox of all different categories. I'm really big on Dropboxes. This way we can drop off a lot of stuff by just sending one link to the broker. We could even share these pictures to them, that these are the different maintenance items that we were not made aware of, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And I've been able to really nicely get some good chunk of money in repair. And then I'm willing to give too. Like, we have sold 10 properties out of the 26, and I'm willing to give $50 or $75,000, for the seller buyer. And so it's a good practice, to really be upfront. And then the more we talk to the seller and the broker early on in the due diligence, the more time we have to negotiate to a good part.
Right. Right. Let's go into the purchase and sale agreement, because I think what you just mentioned about the repair letter is an amazing thing, or not amazing, but I think that it would definitely increase your success in negotiating to a close, assuming, like in any deal, you find things that you hadn't anticipated. But we've talked so far about the letter of intent. You sent it off to the selling broker. He presents it to the seller. Seller thinks, okay, this sounds pretty good. You get positive feedback from the seller then saying, hey, if go ahead and write up the contract, let's do this. Is that
Okay,
essentially
for
what
sure.
happens?
Yeah, from the letter of intent, of course, we are giving them a purchase price which is lower than what they are asking. So there
Mhm.
would be a counter offer, we call it. In other words, that the broker from the seller side is going to return it back and say, no, you can't purchase it at this price, but they will bump the price, right? And then it's for us to accept that, the counter, we call it, and if that is the case, then now the seller is agreeable and the buyer is agreeable at the term of the purchase price and the conditions outlined in the letter of intent. Now the next step is to go into a contract. Yes. So purchase and sales contract, I'm not an attorney or CPA. I always deal with real estate attorney, like mine is very good one, Milton Colgrove from Dallas, Texas. Carrollton is his office, and he lives in Colony. Amazing person. I have met him only 3 times, belly to belly, but we have done business for 12 years now. Can you believe it?
Wow.
He watches over all my aspects of the business and all the contracts and everything. He's at the closing, he's everything. It's all digital nowadays. But the reason I say that is purchase and sales contract is nothing to be copied from somebody and then try to do it to save few $100s. I will never ever suggest that. It's good to get the attorney involved in the purchase and contract and make sure they go through all the lingo. If it's written by the seller, many times seller like to write contracts, which is okay too with me. But the thing is, we want to make sure an attorney looks at it and gives us all the different things that we agreed in the letter of intent are displayed in that purchase and sales contract, which could be 55 page, 65 pages long, and it's got all the legal jargon to safeguard us. So it's very, very, very important, I would say.
Got it. Now that we're in the purchase and sale agreement, like you mentioned, you've got your attorney involved.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess what I'm trying to understand, and you kind of outlined it, I think already, is the timelines, because this is a binding
Contract.
agreement,
It
right?
is.
So I
It
mean,
is.
is you, because the letter of intent is not binding. Now we've moved into series that's binding,
Correct.
and so now we've got timelines that we have to act, or if we don't act, there's a cost, there's a consequence,
Yes.
uh, and what about on the seller side? Are there consequences for their actions?
Yeah, I mean, there is that performance clause, we call it. In
Hmm.
other words, many times it happens that the seller gets more offers even after they have gotten into a contract with the purchaser. Like me, it happened to me in Atlanta area also. And then the thing is, then they are trying to see if there is a way where the buyer will default and then they'll be able to bump up the price by $500,000 or million and sell it to somebody else who's willing to pay more. So that's where the performance clause comes in, where you could tie down the seller to stay with you, to perform onto the sales contract. Mm-hmm.
So, and how does that work? So, I mean, in the contract, I mean, as a buyer, I'm usually aware of the buyer side, but I'm just kind of curious on those seller side. So, is that your chance to keep them in the contract? Is that what you're saying? I mean,
Yeah,
as a buyer?
exactly. See, the thing is, for it to really happen the way we outlined in the contract, the buyer has to do everything possible what is written out there with the due diligence, with getting the title insurance, with getting all these different aspects of the purchase, the environmental study, the loan application for the lender, all those. So there are duties that the buyer has to perform, right?
Mhm.
And the seller also has to perform the duties to make available to the buyer all the documents, all the different things about due diligence, all the different, if there is a survey which was done so that we could contact that company to update the survey, we call it, then it's a much smaller amount rather than sending a surveyor company to start from scratch, things like that. So there are lots of loose parts that the seller has to perform according to the timeline, as well as the buyer has to perform.
But
That's
I
why.
guess what I'm trying to understand is what are the consequences to the seller if they don't perform? Is it just
Oh, I
simply
see.
it gives the buyer the way out of I mean, if they're
I
not
would
going to,
say, I would say, I know my attorneys told me there in my Georgia attorney, he says, Vinny, you could tie up the seller if they don't perform for 5 years in the court.
oh
5 years.
wow, okay,
You cannot sell the property. So,
so that's the ultimate there. It's not just a
yeah.
matter of you saying, well, if you're not going to do this, then we're not going to buy the property, because I guess on a personal experience, I've experienced it where the seller didn't do certain things, and we kind of recognize that if these things weren't in place, it probably wasn't the deal we wanted to pursue. But if I guess where I want to make very clear is that if the property is clearly something you want and the seller's trying to get out of the contract, they're not performing, what your attorney says is we can tie this up for years and
Yes.
then prevent them from selling.
Totally, totally. But you're right. I think there are several clauses that we put in the contract, which could be the property conditions, the lender requirements, and all those, so that the buyer can come out of it safely. All you have to pay then is like $100. I think there is one paragraph or one clause. You have to give $100 or $200 to the seller to get out of the contract. So you're actually abating the contract or nullifying the contract by giving that small fee of $100 or $200 or $500 also. I've seen it. Have you seen that too? I think it's one of the clauses there. Yeah.
It's been a little while since I've looked at one, but I can't
Sure.
stand it.
Yeah.
So, but just to kind of summarize here on the distinction between the two, the letter of intent is where we like the property, we're presenting, it's a non-binding, we're trying
Sure.
to see if we've got somebody who wants to play ball. Then
Yes.
the game gets to the serious state when we go into the purchase sale agreement. There's timelines, there's money, there's penalties,
Yes. Yes.
there's dates we have to hit,
Exactly.
and there's
Yeah.
performance there. And
So true.
I guess the thing I've learned here today is that the opportunity to enforce the contract and prevent the seller from wiggling out of the contract is a different perspective than what I guess I've looked at as a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good.
Sure.
Um, Vinny, if we're going to sum up today's conversation, what's the one thing that you would want the listeners to gain from today's podcast?
I would say that definitely when some property looks promising and you've done the numbers and you're very close to the numbers that you want, take that step. The letter of intent, again, is a non-binding, contract, non-binding document, I should say. It's not a contract. It's good to get into the habit of putting several letter of intents out, even though it could be lower. You never know. You never know the motivation of the seller, why they are selling it, and how much time factor they are in. Just to talk about my villas at Autumn Hills, I was able to negotiate almost 700 to 800,000 lower price because the seller had the loan due. When the loan is due, the seller is very, 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 very motivated because they don't want anybody who will drag the property for 60 days and then only a couple of months are left for the loan due, and then the seller is in a bind. So they wanted to get a performer like me in Atlanta, and I had bought one property from the broker already. This was a second property. I had raised $8 million, with the private equity already. So it was easier for me to tell the broker, hey, I can take down both of them. And they communicated that to the seller. So the seller wanted to get a higher price for the property. But by me kind of looking into the holes and different things they had assumed and so forth, I came up with a lower number from 67,000 a unit to almost like 64,000 a unit. So that was $700,000. And within about a day or so, the seller agreed to sell that to me, So
So
it's good
knowing,
to
knowing,
negotiate,
yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah. No, the time I like what you said though. I mean, get in the habit
Yeah,
of putting letter of intents out, because
good.
if you're not not even stepping up to the plate, it's hard to take a swing at the
Score,
pitch.
right. If you
Yeah,
don't pick up the bat and, hit that and let it hit and see, because, out of so many letter of intents, maybe one, motivated seller will accept the terms that we are looking for. I know in a tougher market like today, what we are discussing now, it's kind of tough to not pay the price that the, owners are asking, actually future pricing, which is kind of sad. I mean, we always learned and we want to buy what's the property worth today, but at the same token, when the market gets hot like this one, many times you have to kind of look at it conservatively. If we could, pay the price maybe a little bit in the future, not too much in the future, but a little bit, if you can bring the economies of scale when you're managing it, yourself or third party. But in the whole session today, I think we just discussed that after all these series of lectures, that it's the time to act.
right, right. And in the reiteration of that, it doesn't cost anything to do a letter of intent.
Sure,
But even if you get in the habit of producing them, like anything, practice will improve your performance there,
totally.
and get you comfortable with that. So that's
For
great.
sure, for sure.
So, Vinny, where can the listeners go to learn more and connect with you?
Oh, sure. They can actually reach me and my team by texting the word syndication, because that's the world I've lived in, syndication, SYNDICATION, to 474747. So three times, 474747, word syndication. My team member will get back to them and we'll provide them some nice information, newsletters, the ebooks I've written. I also have Academy, Multifamily Academy, where I teach what I've been learning and learned over the last 12 years of syndication investing in multifamily only. I don't do anything else. And we provide wonderful templates and, the blueprints and PowerPoints and everything in my courses.
That's great. Vinny, I want to say thanks again for taking the time. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to our next opportunity. And I want to
Surely.
remind the listeners, if you liked this episode, be sure to check out the other episodes linked in the show notes that Vinny and I have discussed. And also, be sure to subscribe, and that way you'll know that the next episode we do, there's a couple more topics yet we're going to go through, and you'll be able to catch them all. And with that, If you like the show, I want to remind you to share it with someone you know. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.